Hey everybody, do you remember the 90s? What was your favorite 90s comedy back then? If you had to pick just one of these comedy movies from this week's list, which one would it be? The 1990s was one of the biggest and best decades, giving us some classic iconic comedy movies. Movies like Dumb and Dumber, Happy Gilmore, and Tommy Boy. Each one of those movies had a lasting impression for decades to come, and you get to pick another classic comedy for our good friend Matt to watch. So stick around for our 90s comedy movie of the week. Hey everybody, welcome back to Movie of the Week. For those of you new here, Movie of the Week is a place where we like to pick out classic movies for our good friend Matt to watch, because every movie on this list is a movie he's never seen before. So for this week, we decided to go with the tried and true selection of 90s comedies. Now this decade has some of the biggest comedies of all time, and we took a lot of thought to go in how we were going to narrow this down into just 4 movies, plucked out an entire decade's worth, especially given that comedy has so many subgenres such as satire, parody, slapstick, dark humor, drama comedies, often called dramedies. We had to ask ourselves what subgenre had the biggest impact, which ones were the most quotable, which ones had the lasting impressions that people were making references way past their movie's prime. And the subgenre that we decided to go with for this week was going to be slapstick. Now, slapstick is often viewed as immature and juvenile. However, given some of our audience members and the people I talk with about Movie of the Week, that kind of seems to be right in our ballpark. So let's not waste any more time, let's jump right into the movies that we picked for this week's list. Now, our first movie on our list is a romantic comedy that was a huge hit. And I know what you're thinking, there's hundreds of rom-coms out there. However, this one kind of stepped the bounds of what our normal traditional chick flick rom-coms were. Had a lot of bold and raunchy humor that attracted some of the male viewers out there. And despite some of the gross out humor, it was also a heartfelt story. Which is why for our first pick, we decided to go with There's Something About Mary. Now, Something About Mary came out in the later 90s. 1998, was directed by the Farrelly brothers and starred Cameron Diaz, Ben Stiller, and Matt Dillon. The story follows Ted, played by Ben Stiller, who is still in love with his high school crush, Mary, played by Cameron Diaz. He sets out to reignite the love crush that he had from her back in high school. However, one thing always seems to end up getting in their way. The next movie on the list is a parody comedy, and there's dozens of parodies out there. However, this one parody movie set out to poke fun at one genre that was rarely mocked. This movie gave us huge iconic characters, a lot of catchphrases. A lot of those catchphrases were just repeated by anybody and everybody and worn out their welcome pretty quick. Although someone may argue that they still like to use them to this day, I don't know. If you ever hear anybody saying these things, they're just probably completely really out of touch. But that just goes to show how big of the cultural relevance that this movie had. And that movie is Austin Powers' International Man of Mystery. Now this movie stars Mike Myers, where he's playing both roles of the protagonist and the antagonist. He plays the British spy Austin Powers, who's relentlessly trying to stop Dr. Evil and his evil plans. However, both of them get frozen back in the 60s and rethawed back out in the 90s. Sort of a fish out of water type movie. The next movie on the list is one of the breakthrough roles for one of the biggest comedians of all time. Some would say that they dominated the entire decade of the 90s and even continued it on into the 2000s and maybe the teens, and kind of fizzled out a little bit after that. This movie gave us a lot of catchphrases as well. However, you can make the argument that they weren't as catchy as what we got in Austin Powers. However, given the comedic talent of this one actor, you can make the argument that he carried these catchphrases for years to come. And so for our third pick, our movie is Ace Ventura: Pet Detective. Now, Ace Ventura was a breakthrough role for Jim Carrey that launched him into stardom and made him one of the biggest go-to comedy stars in the 90s. Now this movie follows our title character, Ace Ventura, played by Jim Carrey, who gets hired by the Miami Dolphins to find their missing mascot, Snowflake. Now the final movie on our list is another breakthrough role for another legendary comedic actor who was big in the 90s and carried their career on into the 2000s all the way up into the 2020s. Now this movie had a cult-like status, had some pretty memorable and lasting quotes, and attracted a younger male audience, despite the fact that some of the jokes in here were a little bit more mature content. We thought it was a great pick, and that's why we decided to go with Billy Madison, starring Adam Sandler. Now this film follows the title character again, Billy Madison, played by Adam Sandler, who is somewhat of a lazy loaf, kind of living off his father's wealth. When his father decides that he's going to pass off the company to one of his other associates, Billy Madison sets out to go back to school in order to prove to his father that he is worthy of taking over the company. However, he decides to go all the way back to kindergarten school and work his way up to high school. So those are all the movies that we have for this week's list. Which movie are you going to vote for? Which one do you think Matt should watch? Like I said before, there's a lot of 90s comedies out there, and we can only pick 4 for this week. If you didn't see one of your favorite movies on this list, chances are Matt may have already seen it. If you have another 90s comedy movie that you would recommend to him, leave your recommendation down in the comments. Maybe we'll get to it some other time on a different vote. Also, don't forget the link to vote will be in the description of this video. And also, Matt has recently created himself a Letterboxd account, which we will also throw the link in that description so you can follow along with his reviews of each movie that he watches every week. That's all the time that we have for this video. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time here on Movie of the Week.